From coast to coast, it's nice to be back home in my backyard here in Miami Beach. Last time I stepped foot in the sand was in Stinson Beach over a month ago already. So it's nice to be back in the sands, shoot another video for you guys. And today's just gonna be a mishmash of a bunch of random different stories. So if that's something you like, great. But if it's not, I just want to make sure everybody knows, it's been a while since I've talked about this, that I do have a second channel now. It's a clips channel. You can find the link down in the description of this video. And there I will have this entire video along with all the other ones I make broken up into much smaller segments about individual topics. So if you're short on time or just want to hear about one thing in one video, go check out that channel. But the first thing I want to talk about is how you may actually have less debt than you might think. You know, we talk a lot about income and debt on this channel, and we haven't really talked too much about how much debt the average American is carrying. And when you look at it, it's not really great. But by knowing these numbers, it can help you figure out where you stand in this debt debacle and understand if you are behind the curve and you have some improvements to make, or if you're doing a lot better than the average American. As of the third quarter of 2024, the average American has about $105,000 in total debt, which is up almost 1% from 1 year ago. And the amount of outstanding debt in the country is at about 17.5 trillion right now, which is up 2.4% year over year. So people are continuously going more and more into debt, just like the US government, with no signs of that starting to change or slow down. Average loan payments, according to Experian, as of the first quarter of 2025, are about $1,237 a month, up from $1,199 just a year ago. So people are spending over $1,200 a month just on debt right now. When we take a look at this chart right here, we can see the average debt balance by type of debt. And of course, mortgages are at the highest, which is not really a surprise. But when you go down this list, Americans are in more debt in every single category except for personal loan debt and student loan debt. Those are the only balances that have actually shrank over the past year. All the other ones are continuing to go up. Credit card debt continues to go up. Retail cards are up. Auto loan debt is up. HELOCs are up. And of course, mortgages are up as well. In fact, the HELOC balances are up 7.2% year over year, and credit card debt is up 3.5% year over year. And one thing that we can gather from that is something I've talked about a lot on the channel, is people are using all of their available debt in order to pay the bills right now. People are turning to credit cards. People are turning to buy now, pay later. Homeowners are turning to pulling equity out of their house in order to pay the bills. And the crazy thing is, this doesn't even really cover all the cash out refinances that are happening right now, where more than half of all the refinance mortgage applications are now cash out refinances, people pulling money out of their home. And yeah, it does include mortgage debt, but that's from over a year ago, guys. Those most recent stats I covered about people pulling more equity out of their house via refinancing is something that's happening this year in 2025. So this data hasn't even caught up with what's going on today, which means the numbers are actually worse than what I just showed you. Also, you can't be fooled by the student loan debt going down, because on the surface, that's a good thing that people are getting out of that student loan debt. However, there has been a lot of student loan forgiveness programs over the past couple of years that can contribute to that. And the fact remains that delinquencies on student loan debt are skyrocketing right now. So the debt that people do have, they have not been able to pay. And also the fact that the average auto loan balance is now at almost 25 grand is kind of insane. People continue to spend more on financing purchases they can't really afford, like homes and cars. And all this data is from Experian, the credit reporting agency, and they have found out that millennials, people in my age group, actually have the largest average mortgage debt at over $312,000, and Generation X had the highest average credit card debt and car loan balances, along with all other non-mortgage debt. So it turns out Gen Xers are in the worst financial shape out of all of the generations right now. And so anybody who's in this situation, I continue to tell people you should try to get out of the debt. Don't continue climbing further and further into the debt hole. Try to get yourself out of it. But that's obviously much easier said than done. And something that's been brought up as a question several times in the comments is, well, Michael, you're always telling people we should get out of debt, but if the dollar continues to be devalued and the value of our currency is being inflated away by inflation, then what's the incentive to get out of debt? Because ultimately, the people who have the most debt are the winners when we hit hyperinflation. And to that, I will tell you, is true, but only to a certain extent. Because yes, while inflation, especially hyperinflation, does help wipe out your debt, it also makes it so that you are poorer right now and cannot get ahead financially and buy assets that do well in a hyperinflation scenarios, like real estate or gold and silver, maybe even Bitcoin. So while that hyperinflation does help wipe out your debt, it also makes it much harder to get ahead right now and prepare for one of these big problematic financial situations that could happen in the future. Because the way our government is going right now, with the spending spree completely out of control and continuing to raise the debt ceiling in this country, it's pretty much a guarantee that at some point the value of the dollar is going to be worthless, guys. So the more hard assets you have, then the more that's going to work in your favor. And if you can't afford to have any of those assets because all of your money is going towards paying for debt, well, how does that help you? So that's my answer to that. But as a rule of thumb, people should be following some basic financial principles. One of them is the 28-36 rule, which suggests that you should be spending no more of 28% of your gross income on total debt. And even I think those numbers are high. I would like to go with more conservative, lower amounts for both, just to give people more wiggle room, because that's gross income. And we all know that you don't take home your gross income. So this percentage of your actual take-home pay could be a lot higher when sticking with those rules, especially depending on which state you live in and how much money you spend. And here's exactly what I mean. The average American right now is spending 45 to 55% of their take-home pay on just debt payments and essentials, guys. So that's more than half going towards just paying off debt and buying the basic needs. Doesn't leave a whole lot of room for extras. This leaves very little room for savings, emergencies, retirement, home repairs, education, major purchases, you name it. And that's why the household savings rate has dropped back down to 2008 levels, and we all know what happened back then. And the current interest rate situation is definitely not helping, because people are paying record amounts of interest on all forms of debt right now. Credit card rates are anywhere between 22 and 28%. Personal loans between 12 and 17%. Auto loans can range between 8 and 14%. HELOCs are between 8 and 10%. And mortgages are between 6 and 8%. And obviously there's a range depending on your debt to income ratio, credit score, and all the other things that play into how favorable of loan terms you can obtain. But the real problem has been, over the past 5 years, that wages are not even close to keeping up with inflation. Food prices have gone up 40, 50% since 2020. Rent is up 30 to 50%. Insurance is up at least 30%. Utilities are up at least 10 to 20% in most cases. And home prices are up over 40% in most areas. Meanwhile, wages have only gone up about 20% during the same time frame. So that 28-36 rule I just talked about is completely blown out of the water by what most people are doing. Most people are taking on way more debt than that, exceeding well over 50% of their take-home pay on their monthly debt payments. And that's just a recipe for disaster for anybody. Other things that are happening behind the scenes is that medical debt is quietly exploding in the background. We have some of the worst healthcare systems in the entire world here in the United States, and delinquencies are rising in every category on mortgages, auto loans, credit cards, personal loans, student loans. They're all up. And buy now, pay later is not even included in any of these traditional debt metrics. But buy now, pay later usage went up by 47% just last year alone. Only just recently they announced that some of the buy now, pay later companies are going to start including their information on people's credit reports. And a lot of Americans don't even realize that their debt is increasing even if their balances stay the same because of interest rates, because of late fees, and the compounding factor of debt. So you're kind of just spinning the hamster wheel if you're making minimum payments on things and continuing to take on more debt in the meantime. And when you have the average debt payment sitting at over $1,200 a month, that doesn't include your rent, that doesn't include your mortgage, doesn't include groceries, doesn't include insurance, doesn't include childcare, something we're going to talk about later in this video, doesn't include transportation, doesn't include healthcare. Those have all become major expenses for every household. So yeah, you can go ahead and continue racking up debt if you believe that hyperinflation is just going to be your savior and wipe it all away. But just know that it is a double-edged sword. Not only is your debt going to be wiped out with hyperinflation, but so is everything else. You're essentially going to be left with nothing. And so the idea here is that if you have less than $105,000 in overall debt, you're doing pretty good right now, which is kind of sad to say. You know, oh, wow, I'm only 50 or 60 grand in debt. That's fantastic. You're 50% below the national average. That puts you in a very high tier of financial savviness. And remember, those numbers are just averages. And when you just take into consideration people's mortgage balances alone, most people are in way more than $100,000 worth of debt. If you have a $300,000 or $400,000 mortgage balance plus all this other stuff, you're well over $500,000 into debt, guys. So that should be the real marker of success. If you're below $500,000 in debt, you're doing pretty good right now. Sad to say.